particular to it. The Catholic Church is open to dialogue with philosophical thought. And it goes on. It's just a wonderful statement.
And I would guess that most denominations have very similar, we don't call them letters, but reports, whatever. I can speak, obviously, we're both Presbyterians, and I was actually a part of the, there was a Keeping and Healing the Creation, same kind of thing, back in '89. So all our denominations, I think, have the those types of epistles and reports to kind of fall back on. But then it comes to action, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You say something, but how does your what is your actions speaking?
Yes.
And there, as you say, most denominations now are divesting from fossil fuels. Sad to say, actually, the Presbyterians are one of the last of the denominations that seems to do that. We took it to GA, General Assembly, sorry, which is the national dialogue, if you will.
Meets every 2 years with an equal number of clergy and lay people.
Exactly, and this issue was discussed very extensively, as typical in our process. These overtures come from the ground up, we're very grassroots. And so there was a total of 4 overtures that basically were focusing on this issue, divestment from the fossil fuel industry. But at the end of the day, that was rejected. So unfortunately, we're one of the last ones to.
And sometimes the rejection is so that by maintaining your investment in fossil fuels, in the oil industry, for example, that means you continue to have a voice at stockholder meetings and can at least bring up a matter of conscience when it comes to the use of those resources.
And that's exactly the argument that was used to justify staying with these investments. The resolution that finally came out did call for us to invest in the alternative energies too. So to expand our portfolio, if you will. But at the end of the day, it says, yes, we keep our fossil fuel investments so that we can engage in with these companies to perhaps get them to change. I don't know how you get a fossil fuel industry to become not a fossil fuel industry, but that was the rationale.
Yeah, and well, there may be other ethical issues layer upon layer that can be influenced by that kind of engagement at stockholder meetings. In contrast, the leaders of the Episcopal Church, this was July 2015, voted to divest its holdings from fossil fuels, citing the fact that fossil fuel burning causes catastrophic climate change. Calling it a moral issue, leaders of this 2 million member Christian denomination said fossil fuel investments would be purged from the church's holdings. That brings up this whole idea of climate change, that one of the reasons that we are concerned about this is that our climate is changing. And I know that in churches is still, among many folks, a controversial stand or point of view. But I went out to Glacier National Park last August, I guess, or July or August, and they said you better look at the glaciers now, because all those glaciers that were here you've missed, and it won't be very long, just a matter of another generation perhaps, before Glacier National Park is Glacier Memorial National Park.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's interesting, again, this book that I referred to earlier from the Presbyterian tradition, Keeping and Healing Creation, this is back in '89, and they mentioned climate change. So it was certainly on some people's radar back then, and of course it's just been growing since then, the realization that this is real. This is something. how do they say, we've basically entered an era where humans are kind of the biggest change agents on the planet.
Yeah.
And our actions are affecting the planet.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, you've become kind of an activist because of Earth Day. You've mentioned your interest goes back to Earth Day.
Earlier than that, but that's
okay. Well, and what led you into this? You even now in your retirement run you're designing computer software. How does that tie in with your interest in the stewardship of the earth?
That's my day job, I guess.
Right.
But no, environmentalism. Actually, you said you were going to ask me that question, and I was trying to think back when it all started.
Don't give it away. Don't sound like we planned this, actually.
But I was sort of at a loss. I actually think it started with my experience with Boy Scouts, quite frankly, not the church at all.
Yeah.
Back then, the church, again, was still very human-centered, unfortunately, as is still many of the case. But no, I think it was Boy Scouts made me appreciate the environment. I also remember back a childhood memory of a wonderful, wonderful babbling brook that went in the back of our property that I just loved, just being there, being restful, meditative, if you will. And then they went through building an interstate and took away that brook.
Yeah.
And it was a real loss. I felt a real loss. So I think those concerns started fairly early on. With the church, it was probably more after or during college,
right,
when we had a number of ministers at college that were starting to sound those themes, and I started to get into it more.
Yeah, interesting you should mention scouting, because our family experience was that our son was involved in scouting, became an Eagle Scout, and I think his Eagle Scout project was to move a trail in a county park with his other scouts. And he went on to the College of the Atlantic, where he studied human ecology and now teaches biology, and has an appreciation for the beauty of the earth, as the hymn goes. And I realize that we often take for granted the natural surroundings we have. As we record this program, here we are edging toward the height of autumn season with the colored leaves and so on.
Out there, sure.
When it does take your breath away a little bit. When I had a pastorate in Vermont, I asked one of the farmers once, I said, here you are, every day you come out and there's the range of mountains, and there's the beauty of this place, whether it's covered in the snow cover for the winter, which extended from November through July, I think, up in northern Vermont. Yes. And I said, do you just take this for granted? And he said, a farmer can't take the earth for granted. He said, you look at the beauty of what's out there. He said, I'm looking at the soil and the ground. And a lot of the farmers were beginning to pay more attention to what they put into the ground, as well as what they took out of the ground. And they were very aware of the ecological balance that could be thrown off by the way they farmed.
Exactly. I think these are things that, as you say, we take for granted, but those who make a living off of it are very concerned about the environment.
And as we go shopping, people are starting to read labels now. And so, the concern about what's in our food relates certainly to this whole idea of earth keeping and the stewardship of our environment.
Yeah, you mentioned food. I think one of the disturbing things is that so many people, they get their food from the food supermarket and have no inkling of what's behind all that. Where does our food come from? And it comes from the earth.
Now, in your own congregation, you're a member of the United Presbyterian Church in downtown Binghamton.
Yeah, correct.
Are there conversations that go on in church school classes or in the session meetings, the governing board,
Yes, we've actually started what we refer to as an evergreen church task force or team, and so there's a group of us that kind of spearhead those efforts. We've built recycling bins so that we're moving into recycling. It takes some time to get people acclimatized to those changes in behavior, but we have the bins out. We've done that energy audit.
Yes.
We make it periodically part of our worship service, which is very important, obviously, and also some of our studies. And I would suggest that the fourth element is, well, and the facilities in general. But the fourth element is the just speaking out. I mean, there's
advocacy.
A lot, right? Yeah. Exactly. Because there's a lot of people, it seems like, working against the environment. So it needs a few people speaking for the environment, and the church is an ideal place for that to happen.
Sure. So it does extend from your own sense of conscience, your own appreciation for the beauty of the place that we are given to live on. I remember reading a book called Rock 2000, which was about the Earth in looking forward to the year 2000. I think the book was probably written in the mid-'70s when Earth Day was taking hold. Mm-hmm. And I named my radio show Celebration Rock, not rock for the music so much as the Celebration Planet.
Very clever.
Yeah, well, if I'm known for anything, it's my cleverness. Thank you. Chris Berger has been our guest today on Encounter, and we've been talking about the stewardship of the earth and the environment that we call home. And I want to say that I appreciate your taking time to be with us on
my
the
pleasure.
Encounter program. For more information, for what your own faith community is doing in terms of earth keeping, I encourage you to do what I did last night. Just go to your search machine on your computer. They still call it a search machine. Google it and look for your denomination and its response to fossil fuels or earth keeping, or you'll find your denominational statements there. And then be sure to look at the way your own church manages its energy resources. You can do this free energy assessment to make sure that you're being careful about the way you treat the earth through the way you treat your congregation. Thank you for joining us. Excuse me, you were worried about losing your voice during the program. I'm losing mine. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Encounter. We encourage you to be with us again next week. Encounter is produced in cooperation with the Broome County Council of Churches. I'm Jeff Kellam, hoping that in the coming week you'll be gentle with people and, of course, with yourself.